to ELIMU TV. I'm your host Lucy Masharia. Today in studio I'm privileged to have a very special guest who is going to be talking to us more about diabetes. Thank you very much, sir, for being available this day.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I'm glad to have such airtime that we can talk much about diseases that are bedevouring the society, and especially diabetes, which is having an escalation in its prevalence rate. And so today we are privileged, we are going to engage you, our viewer, at discussing about diabetes, its causes, as per what will arise as we go on. My name is Joseph Mwangi. I work with an institution called Kenya Diabetes Management Information Center. It was started in 1999 with the basic reason of creating awareness about diabetes across the country, in order that people may be aware of what is diabetes, the causes, and even increasing more knowledge for those who are diabetic to know how they can live positively with diabetes and improve their quality of life. Kenya Diabetes has been doing a lot of things. I can mention them very quickly. We do school and community awareness, where we go to educate children, we go to educate community about diabetes, and we do the screening. In those screening, we are able to pick those people who have diabetes and they have been living with it without knowing. And that has helped a lot, because when we have early diagnosis, we start the management early enough, we prevent what we call the comorbidities or complications that comes with diabetes. We hold medical camps across the country where we give free medical services across the board in diabetes, in hypertension, in general sicknesses. We also do what we call school health program, where we are teaching children healthy living, and then that is transmitted to the community in general. We have a program that takes care about food, because you know diabetic people most of the time develop complications of the feet. So we teach diabetic people how to take care of their feet. And we also have a program of children living with diabetes, where we have got children who come to correct commodities that are necessary for diabetes management. And apart from that, we take them through education as a group. Take them to hotels where we keep them for 3 days, and they are able to be given education concerning how to live positively with diabetes, and also how to manage diabetes across the country.
Yeah, and if I may ask you, what is diabetes? Because you have talked a lot about diabetes, its causes. You have special programs for diabetic people. What really is diabetes? You know, some of us say, I have diabetes, but they are not sure of what diabetes really is.
Diabetes is a non-communicable disease, which is characterized by persistently high blood sugar levels in the body. Whenever we eat, that food is digested. After digestion, glucose has to be moved from the bloodstream to the cells. There is an organ that is called the pancreas that produces a hormone called insulin. The work of the insulin is to open the cells. In layman language, we call them the key, where they open the cell, and the glucose that is in the blood is transferred from the blood to the cells. The work of that glucose is to give us energy in order that we can be able to perform the duties we do in our day-to-day life. So whenever there is a problem with the pancreas producing insulin, that glucose is not able to be moved from the bloodstream to the cells, and therefore the glucose remains in the blood. And that's what we are calling diabetes, because there is that consistently high blood sugar level in the blood that comes about by failure of pancreas to produce insulin.
There are some of types of diabetes. Can you briefly say some of the examples of diabetes?
We have got 3 major types of diabetes, but the very main one are 2. We have got diabetes type 1. Diabetes type 1 is commonly diabetes that affects children and young people. And there is diabetes type 2 that usually affects old people. There is another third type of diabetes called gestational diabetes. This is diabetes that usually affect pregnant women. And this diabetes usually occurs during pregnancy, but after the delivery of the child, the mother are able to resume back to their normal sugar control. But they are put at least at some time down the line, these mothers may develop full-blown diabetes. We have got other types of diabetes, like diabetes that is brought about by other conditions in the body. But the three types I've mentioned, type 1, type 2, and gestational diabetes, are the common type of diabetes that is affecting the community.
And if I may ask, you said type 1 is diabetes for children.
Sure.
And is there any case that a person over 18 years, or by children, what do you mean by a child?
There is an age limit where we mention that any person who gets diabetes below 25 years, those are groups as diabetes type 1. But there are some isolated cases that you can get type 1 even at age 40, because why we label that as type 1 is presentation. In type 1 diabetes, there is totally no capacity of production of insulin from the pancreas. It is totally damaged that it is producing purely no insulin. And so these children or these adults, or call them young adults, we holistically depend on what we call insulin from outside in order that they can be able to survive. But in type 2, there is a little bit of production of insulin by the pancreas. So even though they are diabetic, there is a little bit of insulin that is available from the pancreas. So we do not necessarily require insulin from outside. And that's why you see in managing diabetes type 1, we must inject these patients twice, thrice, or 4 times a day. But in type 2, where there's a bit of insulin from the pancreas, these people may survive on use of tablets. But one thing that is very important to know is type 2, there is a progressive loss of capacity of pancreas. So at one time down the line, the type 2 diabetes may have got a similar situation like type 1, where pancreas is totally not able to produce any insulin. So they may end up using injection to make them live.
And you are using the word insulin so much. What is insulin? Because you have said insulin is the one that prevents diabetes. That's what you said. Like that.
Insulin, I said, is a hormone that is produced by pancreas. And as I had mentioned earlier, insulin is a hormone that opens the body cells for the glucose that is in the system to be able to get into the body cell for us to have energy. So insulin by itself is a hormone. It can be made artificially. So that's why I'm saying, in case I do not have insulin produced by my pancreas, we can make artificial hormone called insulin, put in a bottle, and then I can be able to be injecting myself every day.
And the type 1 diabetes and the type 2 diabetes, do they have the same causes? Or type 1 diabetes have their own causes and type 2 diabetes have their own causes?
Commonly, type 1 has no any specific cause, but we have got, science has got 2 or 3 suspicions. One, it can be an autoimmune disease. Autoimmune, I mean, whenever we got any infection, the body has got its own way of fighting the disease. But in the fighting of the disease, the body sometimes may confuse the cause of the infection with the pancreatic cells. So the body fights its own self and damages the pancreas cells that produces insulin. That's what I'm calling pancreatic problem. And that has been figured out as one of the major causes of insulin type 1. Nevertheless, some children get type 1 diabetes because they have got a hereditary reason. Part of their parents have got diabetes, and therefore they have got a risk of getting diabetes. Those are commonly 2 types. There are some children who are getting diabetes simply because of obesity. But that is typically not like a type 1 diabetes, because for them, they are producing enough insulin, but they are so obese such that they are a lot of overweight is causing resistance of insulin that is produced. So that has got some element like type 2 diabetes, not typically like type 1. For type 1, basically 2 commonest reasons is autoimmune disorder or hereditary factor. For type 2, there are quite a number of ranges that can cause diabetes. One, it is obesity. If you are obese, you develop what we call insulin resistance. So you produce insulin, but it's not able to access the body cells because of the fats that are in your body that are bringing obesity. So that is one of the predisposing factor of diabetes. Two, we have got what we call junk feeding. What is a very apparent of what we are calling junks? We have got sausages, we have got soda, we have got high fats that puts a lot of challenge in our system and makes the pancreas produced by the body have got a high demand because we are putting in a lot of high glucose in our system. And that junk feeding can be a predisposing factor to diabetes. And number three is lack of exercises. Most of us sit the whole day in the office, they walk out of the office, they get into the vehicle, they drive home. And that is a lack of exercises as predisposes us to obesity and very poor utilization of glucose that we are feeding every day. And therefore that is another predisposing factor. Users of alcohol and smokers are at risk of getting diabetes. So those two are also predisposing factors of diabetes. And then definitely age is a factor, because the more you grow old, the more body organs are giving way because they are utilized day in and day out. So people who are above 40 years, we put them as people at risk of getting diabetes. So that is a factor that is very important. And then we say, as I had mentioned earlier, of gestational diabetes, diabetes of the pregnant people. If these people delivers, or mothers delivers, and then they continue with normal life, down the line 3 to 5 years, these mothers have a probability of getting diabetes. So if you have gestational diabetes, the probability of getting diabetes 3 to 5 years down the line is very high. Those are the factors that I've mentioned that may cause diabetes. In a nutshell, we may group them into two groups. There are modifiable factors and non-modifiable factors. Age, family history, and gestational diabetes are non-modifiable because you cannot change anything. But for junk feeding, for obesity, for lack of exercises, for smokers, and for people who are taking beer, those are modifiable factors that we can put and control them and prevent us from getting diabetes.
How can I know that I have diabetes? The signs of diabetes?
Type 1 and type 2 have different presentation. Type 1, it's as I had mentioned earlier, because you are producing totally nothing in terms of insulin. It will be like come automatically. You have a lot of dust, you get very thirsty, you are drinking a lot of water, you get fatigue, you urinate a lot, you get infections like wounds that are not healing. Those are the prime factors that you may have when you are especially having type 1. Type 2, and we like mentioning it again and again, you may live for a very long time. Because remember, as I was starting, I said pancreas is producing a bit of insulin. And therefore, you may have a little bit not high sugars like type 1. So you may live for even 10 years being diabetic and you are not known until you get a wound that is not healing. Or you are fatigued, but you presume it's because you are doing work. You may lose your sight. You may have a lot of urination. So type 1 and type 2 have got similar signs and symptoms as I had mentioned. But the difference is type 1 diagnosis is because the signs and symptoms are very outstanding and cardinal. But for type 2, they are very gradual because a little bit of insulin is produced by your pancreas.
And I do see people with diabetes have some special diets. Like, you see someone with diabetes eating brown bread. Why is that possible? Why is that necessary?
I think the old history put a lot of stigma on diabetes. We do not have special diet in terms of management of diabetes. The portion is what is important. The ugali I, as a person, a healthy person, can eat. The same ugali a diabetic person can eat. But the portion is what is very important. We always encourage that a diabetic person is supposed to have a lot of vegetables. 50% of his plate is supposed to be vegetables, 25% proteins, 25% carbohydrates, because their uptake of carbohydrates is a little bit slower because of minimal production of insulin. Against me, who has got full-blown working pancreas, and my insulin production is okay. So my uptake of glucose is much better. And so I may not require to curtail down the amount of carbohydrates I'm taking.
Okay, thank you, my viewers. We'll be right back after the break. If you have any questions, feel free to join me.
Thank you.
Welcome back, my viewer. And so, Mr. Joseph, can you briefly tell us what are the preventions of diabetes?
I think we've gone through quite a number of the causes. We call them predisposing factors that we say they are modifiable. For type 1 diabetes, I must say it's a huge challenge because we may not prevent the autoimmune problem that the body fights against its own self. But for type 2 diabetes, we have mentioned about obesity, and we can be able to control our weight. I would advise every person should know the body mass index and also know the maximum and minimum weight your body should carry in order that you may know at what age are you. Because the medical people will advise you your body mass index should lie between 18 to 24.9. If you're above 24.9, definitely know you are definitely overweight. If you're above 30, know that you're obese. That is advisable. 2, avoid junk feeding. That is another preventive measure. 3, do a lot of exercises. 4, minimal alcohol uptake, and definitely stop taking smoking cigarettes. If you avoid those factors, you are able to bring down as much as possible the probability of you becoming diabetic.
And you have said about exercise. Are there some special exercises for those with diabetes, or it's any exercise?
No, there are no specifications for exercises. We always advise that you do exercises that are motivational to you. There's some exercises that you can do that's so fatiguing that you won't be able to be motivated to do it tomorrow. So coin up exercises that are motivational and or at home. If you are married, you can combine with your wife or your husband, do skipping of the rope, such things that are motivational, that every day you'll be able to take those exercises. We advise at least make sure that you have 30 minutes of exercises every day that you'll be able to put your right health.
And I understand that people living with diabetes, their medications are very expensive, and most of them cannot afford those medications. And you said that your organization offers some free medications to those people living with diabetes.
Yes, medication in terms of management of diabetes, they are costly. And why I say they are costly is because from the beginning we talked of diabetes is a non-communicable disease. And a non-communicable disease, you live with diabetes throughout your life from the time it was diagnosed. So even if I'm 30 years and I live for 70 years, I'll live with drugs every day for the remaining 40 years. So even if it is costing 1 shilling, you can imagine every morning and evening I'm using 2 shillings for 40 years. So it becomes costly. And that's why we say management of diabetes is costly. 1, because you live on drugs every day. 2, you need to have every now and then visit to your doctor. You need some tests that are done every day. You need eye checkup, you need kidney checkup, you need a specialist who deals with the food to take care of your feet. So these repeated checkups by the medical or the, medical care providers makes it very costly for a person to manage diabetes.
And can you give us some more examples of NCDs?
Non-communicable diseases, as from what we talked about, are diseases that cannot be communicated from one person to another. Diabetes is a major one. We have got high blood pressure, we have got cancers, we have got things like leukemia. There are quite a number.
And stroke. Stroke is one of an uncommunicable
disease. Remember, stroke does not come by itself alone. Most of the stroke people get stroke sometimes have got high pressure or sometimes have got diabetes, because stroke comes as a complication of commonly as a complication of something else, diabetes or high blood pressure.
And can you advise us on how to live with people with NCDs? Because sometimes those people living with NCDs feel like they are being rejected, or some people are just...
I think basically what we need to realize that diabetes, hypertension, cancer is a disease like you get stomach ulcer, or you get amoeba, or you get cold, or you get pneumonia. There's totally no difference. The difference is communicable diseases are treated and within 3 or 1 week they are over. Non-communicable, you leave them forever and ever. So why we put stigma on non-communicable, it's not understandable, because it's a disease like any other disease. We all need to understand that we are low at risk of getting either of what we have mentioned as non-communicable disease. And if you wouldn't like to be stigmatized, I don't know why we should stigmatize that person you think have diabetes and you don't have. So we need to treat every disease equally and give them support equally, because our patients require our support for them to live productive, healthy life.
And the government nowadays is insisting so much on health. Now, can you tell us what's the influence of the government with those people living with NCDs?
One of the most encouraging things that government is doing is encouraging us to enroll in NHIF. That is one of the biggest steps that the government is taking. Why am I saying so? Because NHIF is able to cover the cost of most of the diseases we are mentioning, including non-communicable disease. And that helps us to remove the financial burden that most of the non-communicable diseases patients are getting. See, like how many times we are called because of Harambe, because a diabetic patient is undergoing dialysis, or that patient requires, because has a complication, for example, of the eye, requires to be done cataract surgery. When government is initiating all of us to be enrolled as NHIF members, in one way or the other is lifting the financial burden that the general community is encountering when we are called to help in funding the health attention that these people are requiring. And by, also the government is doing a lot in pressing the healthcare providers closer to the common mwananchi, because whenever the care providers are away from the common mwananchi and they are not able to access that health care, they live in a manner of ignorance, because nobody is available to educate them about healthy living, about the day-to-day screening that they require, and by so doing they get the diseases, them without knowledge, because they have no knowledge of what is diabetes, what is cancer, what is hypertension. And when they get to access of the health care, the diseases are at an advanced stage where they are irreparable.
Yeah, and you know, the government can take a lot of time educating people about NCDs, but are there some ministries that deal with or help those living with NCDs? Some ministries that are fully into NCDs?
There are bodies, not actually bodies that are actually dealing with different diseases. For example, Kenya Diabetes Management and Information Center. We are completely inside diabetes and in some extent hypertension. And as mentioned earlier, we have a project of children living with diabetes. We are able to provide young adults and children living with diabetes with insulin free of charge. We are able to give them a machine for them to be able to monitor themselves every day, and we are able to give them education every day about how to live healthy living. We have got African Cancer Foundation that is dealing also with cancer. So I must say that there are other institutions, non-governmental organizations that are dealing with different diseases that are non-communicable and are actually helping these people who are in these diseases to live a healthy and a productive life.
And you offer free insulin in the institution. Are there any...
children.
For children only?
Yes, for children.
And for that child to get that free insulin, are there any recommendations?
Our institution, Kenya Diabetes, is a walk-in, walk-out institution. When a child comes in, Definitely, we know this child comes in because it's diagnosed with diabetes. You cannot come in if you are not diagnosed with diabetes. So when they come in, we obviously go ahead and enroll these children in our program, and from that point onward, they start receiving free insulin and testing strips in order that we can improve their quality of life. So we do not have any attachment that you must come with a referral letter from a certain hospital in order that you may be enrolled in our program. But we put a lot of emphasis. Ours is not a hospital setup, it is an information center. So these children should move out of their day-to-day or a monthly clinic from their nearby health center or healthcare unit. They come to our institution, they get education, they get insulin, but the other things and the other tests are done at their healthcare providing unit where they come from.
And you give free insulin to children in organization. What's the age of a child?
We have been observing from 0 age to age 18. But if you clock age 18 and you have been in our institution, we don't send you away. We continue providing.
So in organization, it's free for any child, whether poor or whether rich?
Yes. Why we do not close a certain section is because I mentioned from the word go that diabetes is not only taking drugs. Diabetes requires a lot of education. How do you eat? That is nutritional part of diabetes management. The kind of exercises you require. How do you inject yourself? How do you store insulin? And even if I'm rich, I may be short of all those information. And even if I'm able to access that insulin comfortably, and I'm not having information about diet, about storage of insulin, about injection technique, my control will be out of the way. It will not be achieved because injection of insulin alone is not equal to good control. It has to go with what I mentioned: diet, storage of insulin, injection technique, and those other things.
Okay, and can you give us some cautions to avoid NCDs? Not diabetes only, but NCDs in general.
One of the most important things is NCD is not a painful disease. You never hear any pain with diabetes until you reach complication level, especially type 2. Neither in cancer, neither in hypertension. The strongest emphasis I would put is we must have a healthy living. Good eating. Number 2, we must have checkup regularly. It is advisable you have at least yearly checkup of diabetes, that is glucose testing, of hypertension, your blood pressure is checked, of cancer, you have got like cervical cancer screening to rule out cancer of the cervix, prostate cancer screening. Those tests help us to detect problem early and alleviate or capture them before they reach an irreversible position. So I would strongly advise healthy living by terms of healthy eating, and 2, regular checkup to detect the disease and intervene at an early stage.
Okay, Mr. Joseph, thank you very much for coming. And could you say a final word to our viewer?
Thank you very much, our viewer, for being with us throughout the session. We are very glad of such a session of educating you. Once again, I would like to repeat that non-communicable disease is a very heavy financial burden to the country, and we need to apply healthy living in order that we can prevent these non-communicable diseases. Our institution, Kenya Diabetes Management and Information Center, offers a lot of education about diabetes and other healthy living ways. So if you visit us there at Haringam, you'll be able to get those information. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
And before you leave, do you have any social media links or pages where someone can get, many people cannot be able to get to Haringam, so they can use their social media?
You can visit our website, www.dmi.or.ke. You can be able to download even all our events, and whatever we do, you are able to get that.
Okay, thank you very much. Hoping to see you soon.
Thank you, Rose, and your team. We are glad for the wonderful session.